Well, good morning, everybody. This is Mima. In the last video, I shared with you about mine and Fred's honeymoon in our first home. And I didn't tell you that it wasn't long after the honeymoon that I found out that my Prince Charming was not so charming after all. But Fred and I were like so many people that get married. We had our problems. But when we were moving in, I inadvertently hit a Stetson hat that he had that cost a lot of money back in those days, and it turned up the brim just a little bit. And oh my goodness, he got so angry you would have thought Mount Vesuvius was erupting. I'd never seen anybody get that mad about anything. So that was a real eye-opener. And then one day I came home from work, and there in our bedroom was this crude workbench that he had put in there to reload his bullets. It was like 3 foot wide and 6 foot long, and he had a loading tool on the top that looked like an old-fashioned pump, and it stayed in our bedroom for 3 years, so you can imagine how disappointing that was. And I told you how handsome I thought Fred was. Well, evidently I wasn't the only one that thought Fred was handsome, and so he'd been single for 10 years, and first thing you know, I am finding myself jealous. I'd never been jealous in my life, but I'll tell you what happened that caused me to be jealous. One time, someone came up to the door and wanted to see Fred, a man, and said somebody was in the car, and he said, I don't want to go, but whenever he went, he was gone and gone, and so I looked outside, and there he sat with his arm. He just had his arm on the back of the seat. You know, he didn't have it around the girl, but he had it around the seat where she was, and this little country gal didn't like that. Well, then the next thing that happened was we were out at dancing one night, and we were four of us sitting at the table, and all of a sudden I look over to Fred, and here's some gal sitting in his lap, and she wanted to dance with him, and he got up and danced with her. So this little country gal didn't like that either. And then we went on. We went out to a New Year's Eve dance one night, and there was this good-looking woman come over and spoke to us, and I commented about how pretty she was. I mean, she was blonde and had on a gorgeous lame dress, and she had a figure like Lana Turner, and oh my gosh, you know. So when the New Year's Eve came in, she came back over to the table, and she says, do you mind if I kiss your husband? And I'm sitting there. And so she says, well, I'll kiss you too. And she ended up kissing me and Fred. And now this little girl didn't like that either. I'm telling you, I didn't like that. So jealousy began to really get a foothold in my life. And I become very insecure. And then we had this couple that we had met. And I was really glad to have someone that was mine and Fred's age, because my friends were too young for him, and his shooting buddies' wives and them were 10 years older than Fred. So that made an age gap of 20 years between our friends. So we found a couple that fit in our category. So and they invited us up to their apartment to have dinner with them, and I just thought that was so nice. So of course I returned the invitation, and they came, and then they came again and again and again at supper time, and I always said, well, y'all stay and have supper with us. Well, it ended up, Fred was quite a comedian. He had a lot of good characteristics. That's why I married him. But anyway, she became entertained by Fred while I'm in the kitchen doing all the work. And I got tired of that. So jealousy came to live and reign in my life. So Fred's bonding business, he was a bail bondsman at the time, and his work caused him to have to work 24/7, and especially on the weekends, because that's when everybody gets drunk. So he would go to the jail to get someone out, and I would answer the phone for him. Well, it didn't do me much good to answer the phone. This was before cell phones, and I couldn't find him on the phone. He would be gone for hours, and I didn't know where he was or what he was doing. And of course, this was good grounds for the devil to say, he's out with another woman. You know, I mean, he doesn't even know how to protect himself. You know, he might have had an accident. You can't trust him. And so, I mean, y'all, I became miserable. Jealousy is a tormenting spirit. You don't want to be jealous. And I didn't like it. And I knew that if I kept it up, I'd probably lose my husband, because I understand that a clinging vine is not something that a man wants. So on my wish list, I always prayed, but at the end, I told you before, I always said my bedtime prayers, and at the end, I'd put on my wish list. So I wished that I wouldn't be jealous. Well, it wasn't long before I had this idea that, well, you know, if Fred wants to leave, now's a good time, because you don't have any children, and you'd make somebody a good wife. And I thought, yeah, I would. And the thought came to me, well, just quit answering the phone and go to bed. So I told Fred, I said, okay, from now on, I'm not answering the phone. I can't get you on the phone anyway. Answering service can get your messages for you. So I went to bed and I went to sleep. So I got rid of jealousy. Praise the Lord. I'm so grateful. I have not been jealous since. But anyway, I got rid of the jealousy. So then the next thing that happened in our married life was all of a sudden one day we had more bills than we had money to pay. Fred had bought, the first thing that we did when we got married, I don't think we'd been married a month, whenever he bought 4 cemetery lots at Forest Lawn, because this was when Forest Lawn was just getting established. So he bought 4 lots at Forest Lawn Cemetery, and we had to pay for those on time. And it wasn't long before somebody came by selling compact vacuum cleaners. And it was expensive vacuum cleaner. So we had a bill for a vacuum cleaner. And we didn't really need a vacuum cleaner. All we had was one 8x10 area rug. So, but anyway, and that's when I decided that I needed to help with the bills, or with the buying. But we had accumulated other bills. And so we had a lot of bills, 7 or 8 different accounts that we needed to pay money to. And again, I was stressed out, because I was always the one to handle our money. And so I know that I added this to my wish list, because I wish that we didn't have so much. And the thought came to me, pay off the smallest one first, pay them as much as you can, pay the largest one as little as you can, and get out of debt. So that's what I did. So it took me several months, but I got out of debt. And I was so grateful. And I thought it was really interesting that in the middle of all those problems that we were having back in that time, and as I was getting ready to share with you about this, that I read in my devotion that morning, as a neglected garden tends towards weeds, so the faithless life tends towards ungodly chaos. And I really was living a faithless life, because I wasn't reading my Bible and I wasn't going to church. So truer words were never spoken, because we were living in the middle of chaos. And then right in the middle of all this chaos, there was something that happened that I can only tell you was a miracle. And when I share with you, I think you'll have to agree. I had washed my clothes on a Saturday night, or Saturday, and it rained and they didn't get dry, so I left them hanging out on the line. And when I went to bring them in, they were gone. All the clothespins were skewed and I had no clothes. I didn't know where my clothes were. What were we going to do? I mean, I'd already maxed out everything. I didn't, and I had no clothes. Well, I told everybody that I'd lost my clothes, and it was not a week later that I had gone to the bank in Savannah. I was working on the 3rd floor there at Liberty Bank, and I went to the bank, made a deposit, was coming back on the elevator, and this girl got on the elevator with me. And I thought, she sure does look nice. And I looked, and she had on a blouse like I did. And I looked down, and lo and behold, she had on a skirt like mine. It was not a usual skirt. It had a lot of gores in it. And I thought, that is really unusual. And I looked back at the back of her shirt. My blouse, that was just like hers, had shirt buttons on the back. And when you lean against a chair, when you're working, all those covered buttons gouge in your back. So I thought, I had taken them off and put Fred's shirt buttons on there. And I looked, and there was Fred's shirt buttons on the back of the thing. I knew that she had on my blouse. Well, I didn't know what to do. I mean, what would you do? So third floor came and I got off and I went into the office and I told everybody, I said, I just saw this woman, she's got on my clothes. And they says, well, go find out where she went. So there was only one more floor. It was the fourth floor. And I went up there and it was a real estate office and she'd gone in there and she had paid her rent. And so we knew where she lived. So I called Fred, and of course he was real friendly with the policeman, and within an hour I had all my clothes back. And I am just so elated, and I am telling everybody how lucky I was. What a coincidence. I mean, everybody that would listen, I was telling them what a wonderful coincidence it was. But I want to just tell you how impossible what happened was and why I consider this a miracle. I'm no mathematician, but what are the chances of one person out of 140, there was approximately 145,000 people living in Savannah, not counting Chatham County, to get on the elevator at that precise time, on that precise day, with me, with my clothes on, and going to pay her rent where I could find out where she went. What are the chances of that happening? It's just impossible. So what I considered impossible when I had added this to my wish list that I'd get my clothes back had happened. The impossible had happened. And you know, what saddens me is I don't remember anybody ever telling me that when you pray and you ask God to deliver, you know, that you don't like jealousy, that you hate it, that He would give me the answer to me and not being jealous. I don't remember anybody ever sharing with me about how that I had prayed and I'd asked God to help us get out of debt. And He showed me how to do that, but I didn't give Him the credit for it. And I don't even remember anybody ever even sharing a miracle with me that had happened in their lives. So you see, I didn't recognize God. And it saddens me till today that I didn't give Him the honor and the glory that was due Him. So I am so grateful for God's unfailing love, for His mercy and grace. He loves us even when we don't recognize Him. So join me next week as I share with you how I began to recognize God working in my life. So listen, like, comment, share, and subscribe.